Hello, New Zealand. It is episode number 31. And Simon, you are back. Good to see you.
I am. I'm back. I think, well, hopefully most people are pleased to see me. There's probably a whole lot of who aren't, but anyway, too bad.
Okay, very good. I noticed we've got matching shirts because Susanna from the office, my PA and the office administrator, she went and got these lovely shirts that don't sort of, glare in your eyes. Is that what you're wearing? I can't quite see. You're just slightly lower
It
than me.
is. My
It
camera
is. There
angle's
we are.
slightly. Do
Hey,
you have the matching mugs?
we got the, oh, no, sorry. I'm on the road. Sorry about that.
Ah.
Okay, never mind. Look, let's get straight into it because we have got a whole lot of topics. Morning to Jackie, Murray, Marita and Catherine, who are very quick on the scene. Sledge of the week. Is it called a sledge in Parliament when they, say something very pithy that sort of is a laugh and attack somebody? Is it called a sledge?
We sort of use it. It's more of an Australian term. I'm actually trying to think what you would describe it here. But yes, let's run with sledging. It's an Aussie term, but we can run with it.
Okay, well, Sledge of the Week goes to Winston Peters because we're going to talk about the pay equity claims, etc., the whole issue around that. And, of course, Winston Peters just couldn't stop himself.
This is about robbing Paula to pay Paul. When you start talking about pay equity, the first thing you must understand where women is concerned is what a woman is.
Yeah, I've got another one to show a little bit like that. But anyway, we will continue. Look, let's get straight into the latest polls because there was actually two polls that came out today. So firstly, the New Zealand Taxpayer Union won, which has said that National will be pretty happy about this. They're up 1. Labour will be happier as well, up 3. ACT down a little bit. Greens down. So the Labour vote the Green vote is obviously going to Labour. New Zealand First still fairly decent, and Maori slightly down. So if you just look at the trend, the only trend that I noticed there, Simon, is that green line is just all the rest are sort of holding their own, I guess. But that green line, the Green Party. And if there was one positive that I can take from Canada and Australia is the decimation of the Green vote. Absolute in Australia. I mean, their leader, the Chloe Schwarbrick of Australia, lost his seat, Adam Bant. I mean, that's got to be some silver lining with everything we've seen in Canada and Australia, hasn't it?
Look, I think so. At one level, it's a rejection of their radicalism. At another, it's their obsessive focus with issues overseas, the likes of Palestine, and at the same time, of course, as you know, Bob, talking about importing culture wars. But part of it too, I think, is Australian voters in particular went, you know what, we're better off backing Labour and ensuring a strong result there. A little bit of what happened in 2020 in New Zealand when National was hopeless. People went, well, we don't want the Greens dictating to Labour. So people made sure Labour, including National voters, got in. But yeah, that'll really hurt. But he's a terrible radical.
Yeah.
So good riddance.
Okay, so from that poll, would you say, look, probably Labour would be the happiest from that poll, wouldn't they?
I think so. Look, I mean, there's a lot of observations. I mean, in many ways, things are still holding. If you have that graph, for me, there is actually a little bit of a wider trend. Labour is slowly rebuilding.
Yep.
National is too. They've certainly been up and down, but I think the red line is just slowly going up. I mean, overall, the centre-right would win today on those numbers, but you've heard me say it often, National should be in the 40s. This is only the first term of their government. They should be more popular, and I'm certainly not someone who wants to see the centre-right vote split, and that's no offence to New Zealand First and ACT, but personally, it should be higher and much more comfortable.
Okay, now there was another poll out. So there was actually two polls, as I said. The other is the Roy Morgan poll. Now, I did find this interesting because you'll see there, so I've just circled National and New Zealand First. So on the left, the figure on the left is what they got in the election 18 months ago. And then on the right is what they are now. So National was 38 in the election. It's gone down to 31. New Zealand First is 6, gone up to 9. So that I found that quite interesting. And then if you look at the, not that one, that one, Labour has gone from, well, I found the left-wing parties have generally held their own. Labor 27, let's say, up to 28 and a bit, so not much change. Greens have jumped on the Roy Morgan poll, so it'll be interesting to see if that's across the board. Maori Party, slight increase. And I did just note others have dropped from 5.6 to 4. And that's my warning to minor parties, is that if the only time you speak up is in the lead up to the election and then you disappear for 2 years, you're back to square one. And my encouragement to minor parties is be heard, be seen throughout the whole electoral cycle. I don't know whether you think that's a fair comment, Simon.
Oh no, I think you're completely correct. It's a long game in politics. One of the things I was often struck with, didn't matter if it was little political parties or people very passionate, they want change immediately. It's not really how it happens. I may have said it before, but politics, or certainly government, is like, or the parliament is like a super tanker. It takes a long time to turn. So it doesn't matter if it's someone wanting to run as a candidate to be an MP, a political party, or someone even lobbying for various topics. It's a long game.
Yeah.
You know it by yourself, Bob. I mean, you've been at this, was this the 20th year for Family First? Things take time.
Yeah, really long time. Now, this is the interesting thing. So Roy Morgan asks, is the country going in the right direction? On the left is election night, and on the right is now. So on election night, 31% said we were going in the in the right direction. It's now up to 40%. Going in the wrong direction, and obviously the reason for the change of government, 57%, down to 43%. So despite all the media noise, it actually seems that people are generally satisfied with the direction of the government. And of course, left-wing parties in the media won't be too happy at that, but that's quite an interesting statistic. So I guess the question, Simon, is if people are happy with the direction the government is taking, why are they not doing better in the polls?
Well, I suppose the way to look at it, firstly, that's really encouraging. That sort of right direction, wrong direction was always the element of the polls when I was in Parliament that people were interested in. I suppose you could mount the argument that actually that the government is still doing okay. National might be in the low 30s, but along with ACT and New Zealand First, that becomes much more reflective of your right direction. As I say, if there was an election called today on those polling numbers, the centre-right would win. And so I think it does match. It's just that the major party is no longer as major as it used to be.
Okay, so that was just breaking news. So that was pretty fresh, hot off the press. So we had to quickly get ready for that one. So I'm glad we got through that question, Simon. What is Mother's Day? Because can we actually define what is a mother? Interestingly, some polling was done, Courier Market Research. And once again, we found out that this bill that New Zealand First has introduced, defining man and woman in legislation, the media were all over it. They couldn't slam it enough. Every critic that they could find. And then we released this polling just on Monday. So we commissioned the poll, but it was done independently through Courier Market Research. And look, Courier Market Research is no right-wing conservative group. It's run by David Farrar, who would disagree with us on just about every social policy that I've polled on. So, and that's part of the reason that I use Courier Market Research, for that exact reason. Nobody can say that we've got a closet social conservative running the company. But it found that there was 52% support for needing the legislation, 29% opposed, and then the remainder neither each way. And I think a lot of people sort of think, well, why do we even have to go down this track? But here's the interesting thing, Simon. Media have not touched this. There was one 1-minute report on Newstalk ZB by Jason Walls, the Newstalk ZB political editor. But the media have run for the hills. They just don't want to talk about the public narrative, do they?
Not the mainstream media, for sure. So I was on the platform talking there, I think, yesterday.
I was on RCR.
Yep, RCR. So I was thinking RCR, the platform, obviously we talk about it, and not trying to sound too vainglorious, but we've got a good reach. But the mainstream media avoid it for the simple reason, and you know it, Bob, they don't like these topics. They have their view, and the facts don't matter. And so when the facts are against their narrative, they ignore it. And you've heard me talk before, but this is the censorship which exists in modern mainstream media. It's no longer that they simply unbalance stories; they just ignore a whole array of stories that people just don't get to hear about things. So again, it's really important why these, if you will, alternative media like RCR, the platform, what we're doing, and why people need to tune in, because this is where you can find out actually what's happening. And by the way, make up your own mind. There might be people here who disagree. That's fine, but at least you know what's happening.
Okay, one other thing, we just wanted to give a couple of heads up. Firstly, that the Relationship, Sexuality and Education Review, they are wanting public input. I think they're getting lots of it from both sides. The submissions are due by the end of tomorrow, Friday, and the links are on our website. It's just a survey monkey. You literally just fill in this form where you look at the age groups and you say, they've suggested topics to cover. Do you agree or disagree? And so it's not too hard to fill out, but I think I just showed this article from the Post. This is by Katie Fitzpatrick, who was actually the author of the 2020 Radical Guidelines. And, they're saying the sexuality guide for teens is out of touch, basically because it hasn't got the extremist sexuality and gender content, and talks about, unbelievably, heterosexual sex and the consequences of having babies as a result of male-female sex, weird stuff like that, which is so yesterday, apparently, according to this article. But the other side have certainly ramped up a little bit, haven't they? We saw Benjamin Doyle, the Green MP, the interesting, weird Green MP, talking about it as well. So, look, any words of advice just for parents as they respond to this, Simon?
Well, it's really two words of advice: is do submit. This is where the tire hits the road, and it's actually a part of parental responsibility. So, family first. We will put in our thoughts, and that's great. But actually, this is where individual parents and those listening, this is your time to step up as well. The second is, as we all do, just politely saying it's about age appropriateness. And a lot of what they have been taught in RSE and what the Benjamin Doyle and the Green parties and the radical activists want are exceptionally explicit, if that's not tautological, but exceptionally explicit materials taught to very, very young children. And some of them may even want to use strange emojis, but that's a whole different topic.
Well, speaking of strange emojis, the other warning that we just want people to be aware of is that next Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday, is Pink Shirt Day. And if it was about bullying of all kids, and targeting all bullies and all forms of bullying, then we'd be big supporters. But no, it's not. It's a deliberate drive to infiltrate LGBT identity ideology. And if you don't believe me, we have got a McBlog that we've put together. We did send out a newsletter, and hopefully most people are aware of that. But a lot of people still genuinely believe that Pink Shirt Day is, in fact, went into a cafe yesterday and they were all wearing pink shirts. And I thought, have you got the wrong day? And then I noticed the signage. It was actually, I can't remember the cafe. It was a chain, Robert Harris. And it was breast cancer awareness. And I actually said to the people, what's the pink shirt for? Breast cancer awareness. Oh, that's a great cause. I don't know if they actually got what I was getting at. But the reason that I say that this is about pushing down LGBT ideology is because in the guideline that is given to schools, basically says keep up the mahi, and it's about starting a rainbow group. It's about celebrating Schools Pride Week. It's being inclusive and getting inside out, which of course is the radical group that did the program in the first place, the RSE program, getting their resources, creating rainbow inclusive schools, legal rights at schools for rainbow young people. So it's very clear that Pink Shirt Day, and if you watch the McBlog on this, you'll actually see examples of role models that they're pushing and the books that they want kids to read. But here's the other kicker, Simon, just before I get your comment on this, is that in their own booklet, they actually look at details around bullying, and they do a little whoopsie because they actually admit that 7% of same or both sex attracted participants said they'd been bullied, but then they admit that 20%, 1 in 5, are bullied because of their ethnicity. Whoops. So I'm just looking forward to when Pink Shirt Day actually addresses all those types of bullying and just says no bullying, full stop, rather than ramming down LGBT indoctrination. But anyway, once again, your advice?
Well, don't encourage your kids. Go to the school board. You probably can't stop this year, but say we don't need to be part of it. This is not something that's mandatory. Again, as parents, you hold a lot of power, or as grandparents. So just remind people you don't need to be part of this. And you've rightly identified what the problem is. I mean, if this was literally a comprehensive anti-bullying, that'll be fine. If it was addressing, say, bullying based, including being, homophobic and abusive towards people, that's fine. But that's not what this is about. It's becoming almost exclusively focused not only on calling out that bullying, which again is inappropriate, but using Pink Shirt Day to promote agendas. And the fact that someone like Inside Out's anywhere near it is a major problem. So again, the power is in the hand of parents. You don't have to let your kids, well, I suppose there's always a challenge if you're the only one not, but actually, maybe a good day to homeschool if it's a real issue.
Yeah, go
maybe
for
that's
it.
not the right advice. I don't know.
Go for a field trip.
Go for a field trip. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's continue. We've got two big topics. Firstly, around the social media ban, and obviously this is one close to our hearts. We hosted Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Anxious Generation, and at the conference last year. So let's just quickly look at the announcement. And I do want to ask a couple of comments about the whole process around this for you, Simon, but just very quickly. So this was the announcement yesterday, which I think, in fairness, caught a few people off guards.
And I have to say, as a dad, I feel very strongly that we need to do a lot more to keep our kids safe from online harm. This is an issue that I've been passionate about since 2018. We have restrictions to keep our children safe in the physical world, but we don't have the equivalent restrictions in the virtual world, and we should, frankly. It's time that New Zealand acknowledge that for all the good things that come from social media, it's not always a safe place for our young people to be, and we need to do something about it. Parents and teachers are constantly telling me that they're worried about the impact that social media is having on our children, whether it be through cyberbullying, exposure to inappropriate content and exploitation, and also social media addiction. Now, parents obviously have a very big role to play in monitoring what social media their children are consuming, but so too do the social media companies, frankly, and this bill will empower parents as a result. Social media should not be exempt from social responsibility, and it is time that we put the onus on these platforms to protect vulnerable children from harmful content, cyberbullying and exploitation. We have seen the benefits of actually putting boundaries in place for our children with National successful cell phone ban in schools, which has led to increased student engagement and also improved learning outcomes, and it can be the same too on social media. Now, Catherine's bill is going into the biscuit tin, as you well know, as a members' bill, but I also want to signal that I'm very keen for us to explore picking it up as a broader government bill, making its potential passage into law much faster.
Okay, I do have a question about that, Simon, because I thought I had my head around it. But yeah, just one graph that I did see when I saw some commentary on this, and this is out of the UK, and it looked at just the percentage of teens depressed based on their hours. And I mean, the hours is only looking up to 5+ hours, 5 hours or more. As we know, it affects girls more. The mental harm of social media is doing more harm to girls than boys. We've already seen that kind of research. So this is the thing I don't understand, Simon. My understanding is that you can only have a government bill if you get the sign off of the 3 coalition parties. So it's got to be ACT, New Zealand First, and National who tick the box. If one of those parties says no, then it can't be a government bill. And we know that ACT have said no, because we know that ACT is actually a left-wing party, but they just don't like taxes. Some people do not understand that, but ACT are a left-wing party who just don't like taxes. That's about the conservative aspect of them. You might want to comment on that, Simon, but the fact of the matter is, if ACT haven't ticked the box, I was listening to some commentary just today. Who was it? I think it was on the platform with Catherine. Wed, is it? Catherine
Wed, yeah.
Wed, with Catherine Wed, and they were saying, "Why isn't this a government bill?" And I was yelling out, "It's because ACT won't tick the box," but they never got to that point. So, am I missing something here?
No, not really. ACT has certainly taken its position. I mean, I don't agree with it. I think they're sort of in some ways they're having a buck each way, because we won't support the bill and a select committee process, but we just want to have an inquiry. Now, there's nothing wrong with an inquiry, but they're sort of, again, sitting a bit on the fence. Look, you're right insofar as that all the parties of government do have to agree, but ACT is a minor party. If New Zealand First and National wanted this to go forward, they could have pushed it, I think. There's the agree to disagree clauses. It's been deployed a few times where I think the likes of Winston and David, as in Seymour, have said, look, the government's introduced this bill, we don't agree, we'll vote against it. And of course, you've got the whole Treaty Principles bill, which none of the parties agreed with, but they allowed in. So there's a little bit, for me, of a weakness in that argument. I understand why ACT has said no. I can, if you will, Bob, understand then why the government said, the other parties said, okay, well, we'll just put it in the ballot. But I personally feel they could have actually held a stronger line. I mean, the Prime Minister often talks big about these things he's passionate about. Well, you're the Prime Minister, mate. Use some leverage. ACT can still vote against it, but actually most of the other Parliament, even Labour, are generally supportive. And this is the last point.
Oh, go
sorry, no, after you.
I was just going to say, I just want to clarify that point, though. So it's a government bill if the coalition partners agree. Otherwise, it becomes a private member's bill which goes in the biscuit tin. There's no kind of middle ground, is there?
No, there isn't. So by and large, the government of the day decides what its legislation is going to be. And so in most cases, the laws you see being proposed have been agreed in Cabinet by all the parties. But there have been instances where laws are being put forward where one of the three coalition partners does not agree. Or in the Treaty Principles case, 2 of 3 didn't agree. So it can happen that the government can introduce a bill that not all agree with. But if it's not the government putting bills in, it's individual members of Parliament. And that's what Catherine's doing. So kudos to her. But my last observation on this, and I've taken this from someone else, not as in plagiarism, but it was an insight I thought was right. Luxon's fronting this much more than her. But you see, if it all turns to custard, he can throw Catherine under the bus. If it actually does work out, he'll claim the fame. So Catherine's sort of been a bit caught in this. I suppose it's the hierarchy of Parliament. But really, this should be a government bill if they truly believe in it.
Okay, but once again, I just go back to the point. If ACT are not playing ball and they're saying we don't even think this bill should go to a select committee, which is my plea to them, let it go to a select committee and nut it out. They're suggesting that it just goes to a inquiry, have a talk fest. But if ACT aren't willing to enter into it, it can't be a government bill, can it? Unless David Seymour would still have to give permission for it to come out of government as a government bill, wouldn't he?
He would. You can hear I can't give an absolute definitive answer. I don't think it's a veto. I don't think any of the parties hold like an absolute set veto. What we're saying here is either the National New Zealand First didn't push ACT hard enough to go, really, this is the hill you want to die on. ACT wants to stop a piece of government legislation, and it's this piece. Again, there's been other laws. I'm not even talking about treaty principles. There's been other laws the coalition governments put forward, government bills, which parties like New Zealand First have voted against. They're allowed to do that. They can do that. So you've got the strange situation, Bob, where in effect, yes, ACT has stopped this. ACT has stopped this bill becoming a government bill. But to me, it's as if this is a hill they're prepared to die on. Like they really sat in cabinet and said there is absolutely no way we're going to agree to this. And did the other side, did National and New Zealand First Ministers push back hard enough to go, well, come on, guys, let's at least have a conversation. So I don't know if I can answer it much better than that. I know it's not absolutely clear and definitive. It's probably the nature of politics.
Yeah. I just want to show an excerpt from Q&A where they actually had, so this has been passed in Australia. It hasn't come into effect yet. So anybody who says Australia has done this and it hasn't worked, they're lying because it hasn't actually come into effect yet. but it was agreed on and passed and approved by actually both sides of the political aisle. Q&A interviewed the South Australia Premier Peter Palinoska. Have you heard of him? Do you know if he's a... No. I'm going to just, while we listen to this. So let me just play you this clip, because I thought he made some pretty good points, and I've just taken some key bits out of the Q&A.
There is through whistleblowers and other reports, we've got to remember that some of these social media companies are industrialising addiction with the explicit objective of making a profit. Now, that's a rational thing from their perspective, but it's completely irrational from society's perspective, where we see evidence of social media becoming so intrinsic in young people's lives that it results in social withdrawal rather than healthy engagement.
The proposed law puts the onus on social media platforms to verify the age of their users. But how would that actually work in practice?
Yeah. So look, the simple fact is that the nature of this technology is constantly evolving. So when you craft a law or a piece of legislation to address it, you've got to have an ability for that regulator or that legislation to respond as things evolve. So what Chief Justice, or the former Chief Justice of the High Court, Robert French, has recommended is imposing a positive duty or obligation on the social media companies to take all reasonable steps to prevent children, and when we're talking about children here, from getting access to accounts. And there's a range of things that social media companies can do. I mean, these are highly sophisticated, highly advanced technical operators. Age verification technology is on the move, so that would constitute a reasonable step for a social media service to put in place before a young person gets access to an account. Do children drink underage? Of course they do. It happens, right? Kids sneak behind a garage to have a cigarette. But that doesn't mean we abandon the practice of putting in place laws and standards that we hope society seeks to uphold. And it's not just because a young person might stop drinking underage because the law says that they shouldn't, but because the rest of society around that says it's a standard that we should collectively try to apply. And social media services shouldn't be exempt from having any regulation or any obligations put on them. And this is the point. What we've now got is this huge technology that is for profit, industrialising addiction, and they're operating in a completely unregulated environment in this, what constitutes probably one of the biggest social experiments we've ever seen in human history. That we
I found it hard to disagree with that, Simon. I just did Google, and he is Labour Party, so this is a left-wing politician. But I thought his arguments were correct. They are unregulated at the moment. It is the Wild West out there. Our children are the victims of this targeting. Even whistleblowers have said that they deliberately try to addict kids into this material. So I think it's time that we as adults stood up.
So the short answer is yes. I mean, it's a problem. It's a demonstrable problem. You and I have talked about this a lot the last few days. I mean, the first point I'd quickly make to people, it's not simply about harmful content. So we're not talking about children just coming across pornography, inappropriate content, violence. It's actually just the fact that they're on for so long. In fact, your graph that you presented earlier, Bob, reinforces that. And I think that's a big element that comes out of Jonathan Haidt and others. So even if your child is just on the device reading wholesome books and having lovely conversations with people, it's still not good for their development. I just think that for me is really key for parents in particular to understand. It's just the simple use of the device. And of course it gets worse if they end up obtaining, inappropriate materials. Does there need to be something done about it? Absolutely. But you and I have discussed and debated this too. It's really the how. I think people who are saying, well, look, if you're going to age verify for children, effectively you have to verify everybody. For you to know that someone is 16, 13 or 12, you need to know that I'm 49 and you're, whatever. So there are, I think, legitimate concerns from some free speech advocates. They're worried about sort of government-controlled digital IDs and what that will mean. But I don't think that takes away from ultimately the need that something has to happen. Yeah. And maybe this is my final point. I think it needs to come from parents and the community more than government. But just like the cell phone ban, and you mentioned that to me today, it takes the government to sort of, I don't know, give the impetus, give some of that structure to empower the community to do so. And that was Jonathan Haidt's point. It's actually up to the community, but it looks like we need some government support to make that happen.
Yeah, actually, I just noticed a story. I can't remember if I think I just sent it to you just before you came on here about that Washington, D.C., they're debating this as well. Two Republicans have introduced a bill that would put the onus on Apple and Google to verify the user's age. And they've said that it would require app stores to determine a user's age category, which differentiates age groups younger than 18, and then send the data to app developers. So basically, it's at that high level of when you first download the app, you've got to prove that you are above 16. I just do.
I quite like it.
Yeah, I just do struggle with the argument that this is all about digital ID and it's thin edge of the wedge. I understand that argument, but I just worry that that's being used as an excuse to say, let's kick this whole issue down the road. We're not going to tackle it because we're worried about the digital ID, and this is just a sneaky way of getting us all on digital ID. I think there are ways around it. Look, the fact of the matter is, Simon, as I've joked on Daybreak, you and I could start talking about the fact that we'd like our next staff meeting to be at Waikiki in Hawaii. And I can guarantee within 12 hours, we'll start getting advertisements on our feed for nice hotels in Hawaii. I know that social media companies can figure this out. I think we should put the onus on them and say, unless you can guarantee, then we're going to penalise you. I'm not quite sure that there's a bad thing about giving it to some of these social media companies.
I think mostly we agree. I think where I disagree with the digital ID people who get concerned, I think it's a legitimate concern, because if it's the government or a major corporate having to collect everybody's effectively digital data to age verify for children, we've still given them an enormous amount of information. And that rightly makes people uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. But the real distinction is that does not and should not become an excuse for inaction around protecting young people. We have, as that Premier from South Australia said, we have a major social experiment happening, and the early, if not mid data is not good. There's a serious problem. In other words, the digital ID concerns is not an excuse to do nothing. I quite like the App Store idea. Again, you only shared it to me earlier, and I'm still pondering it, but that sort of, I think, helps a lot of people who are worried about what they do on the internet. It's one thing to be saying, I have this app, be it Facebook or Instagram or Reddit or whatever. It's quite another thing then to say what you're doing with it. And that's, I think, actually a really helpful distinction. And that's why they're targeting Google and Apple, because that's pretty much the conduit that most people access the internet. So where we get our apps for all our phones and saying, right, okay, you will get ID'd. You will have to verify your age in order to download the apps. A, protects children, and B, how you choose to use those apps, well, then that's up to you. Your privacy really is maintained.
Don't we already have a digital ID? It's called a passport or a license.
We do, and you've got your health ID and so forth. But I think the concern is with the ubiquity of the internet these days, where we do all and so much, that if the government's able to collect even more data on everything you're doing and saying, which effectively, if you're having to share who you are in all those realms, is raising alarms. And people will point to the likes of communist China, which is not actually an extreme example, but I think there is a legitimate nervousness about how much information you give over to government to know about, if you will, even more elements of your life. But I'd want to repeat, Dickie, for our viewers, that should not be an excuse to stop us protecting children. I mean, that's very much the position at Family First. We need to protect the children, these harms to the children. And again, I want to repeat, even without having to see, let's say, pornographic or violent material, simply having the child on a device for hours a day is affecting their development.
Okay, so the argument is, and we've had this with other debates, euthanasia, there was an inquiry, abortion, it went to the Law Commission, even the cannabis issue went to the Law Commission first, hate speech went to the Law Commission. So there's this argument that you have these inquiries. In fact, that's ACT's argument. Let's send it to a select committee and let's have an inquiry. what does that argument work, or is it better just to say, look, a bill has been submitted, let's put it to select committee, at least we've got something on paper, and let's fix it, make it a good bill, and see if it works, get all the public input. What's your response to whether an inquiry is better or a bill sent to select committee?
Personally, I'm for the bill. I think enough of the Parliament's in agreement that something needs to be done. Catherine's clearly done some of the work. The Prime Minister is behind it. As I said earlier, he should be throwing his weight around on this one. It should be adopted as a government bill, even if ACT wants to vote against it, but then open it to the public. Like, is the whole point of a select committee process. Open it to the public. It's effectively an inquiry. They can change the bill. They can update it. You know, I think everybody wins. I mean, ACT's call for an inquiry is not wrong, but I think it's sort of a weak response to try and, in any sense, hide or diffuse their decision to not support it.
Okay, Jonathan Haidt obviously was an influence on Christopher Luxon, well, he's been an influence on Simon and Bob as well. Christopher Luxon admitted that he first became aware of this issue when Jonathan Haidt visited the country in 2019, and of course we interviewed him for our forum. Tumby, our staff member, who's very clever on this, put together this little compilation of basically what he thinks are the 4 responses to this issue that kids are facing, and I think it would be good just to reiterate that. So let's just have a quick watch.
So the key to solving this is to recognize the key to the origin of the problem, which is a collective action problem. Why are all the kids on Instagram and TikTok, even when they themselves say, if you talk to college students, they say it's really bad for me, it's bad for us, I wish it didn't exist. They literally say that, and surveys show that. So why are they all on it? Because they're trapped, because it's a collective action problem. And so if you take your kids out of it, it's not clear you're helping them, because now they're isolated, they're alone, and they're going to hate you. And what that means is that if we take them all out together, we win. And so we have to do this together. And it can be as local as you, if you're listening to this, our discussion here, if you have, say, 9-year-old kids and you're in touch with the friends, the parents of their friends, just coordinate with them. Because if you do these things together, we can solve this. So the first is no smartphone before high school. In the United States, we have a clear divide around age 13, 14. Give them a flip phone, give them a phone watch. Don't give them the internet in their pocket before 14. Second rule, no social media till 16. Social media is completely inappropriate for minors. It's an adults-only thing. It's full of sex and violence. It's full of solicitation. It's full of marketing. It's full of real dangers for kids, all kinds of scams, manipulation. So, adults, we let them make their own decisions, and if they want to do things that are bad for them, that's their choice. I don't want to let companies just reach my children and do things that are bad for my children without my knowledge or permission. Yeah. This is insane. So no social media before 16, and for that, it would be really helpful to have laws. We can actually get this done mostly just with norms, not laws. But on this point, getting legislation, which is happening in Florida, in Utah, it's happening in the UK, is working on this too. If we can get legislation to say you can't even open an account until you're 16. The law currently says 13 and it's not enforced. Why not raise it to 16 and enforce it? So that's the second rule. No social media before 16. The third norm is the easiest of all. We can get it done this year. It's phone-free schools. It's complete insanity to let kids have a phone in their pocket during school. Most schools say you're not allowed to use your phone during class, which is like saying to heroin addicts, you can bring your needles in to the clinic, you can bring your stash in, but just keep it in your pocket. Just don't take it out and everything will be okay. They can't. They have to take it out. They have to be texting during class. They have to be watching TikTok during class. So the only solution is lock up the phones in the morning when they come to school in a phone locker or a yonder pouch, a lockable pouch. The fourth is the hardest because it's the one where we have to give up something, not our kids. It's more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. It means we have to overcome our fears and let our kids out and let them hang out with other kids with no adult supervising. What if there's a fight? What if there's an argument? What if there are hurt feelings? Yeah, that would be actually good. They need that. So again, it may not be as much of a change in New Zealand, but as you said, like you're following us in all the bad trends. So don't follow us. Look at what we did and just never do what we did because we really got this wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with that, Simon. I thought it was interesting, even with the phone ban, when that was suggested. I mean, I can remember television coverage of that, and they had principals saying, we've got more important things to worry about. And yet now I think you would go to most schools and say, hey, that's been a really good call. We've seen really good consequences of it. And, maybe we've just got to make some hard decisions around the social media one. Because as I did hear on a debate, they said, has the horse already bolted? I think in some ways it has, but then again, we've also got a whole younger generation that are coming into that age group where they're going to be getting into these same pressures, the same cyberbullying, the exposure. And so this is going to be an ongoing issue, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, it is it's bolted arguably for one generation, but you're dead right. There's a new one coming through. Why wouldn't we do anything? I've exercised my mind, but not come to any great conclusions of why we seem to have some of these, I don't know, academics, elites, or school leaders who go against common sense. The phone ban's a good example. Why on earth would any teacher or principal say it's a good idea? I mean, it's just absolute common sense. And yet they find all these extraordinary reasons, often amplified through mainstream media, which make no sense. It was one of the best things this government's done. I suppose the only other quick thing I'd add, and not that I would want to add more to the esteemed Jonathan Haidt, but I'd add number 5, and that's actually that we as adults have to mirror good behaviour to our kids. And I will admit, I say to the kids, no phones at this, when we're watching the news or we're at the dinner table or having breakfast, and then I find myself subconsciously pulling my phone out because, Bob McCoskrie sent me another text. But jokes aside, we as adults have to mirror the behaviours that we want our kids, because they always pick up on it, don't they, Bob? They say, oh, hey, Simon, you've got your phone out. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, let's work. But actually, we need to be exempling good behaviour to our children.
And I think if we find it addictive, then kids are going to find it even more addictive. And look, that's been the whole, I noticed, I did check in a couple of examples of other bills. Florida, I thought, was a very good bill, and it talked about the fact that they specifically didn't want to take away all communication and, WhatsApp and the ability for kids to communicate with each other, but it was taking away the scrolling. It was taking away the alerts. It was taking away the likes. And even Instagram took away the ability to show the count of how many likes you got, because they realized that was an issue and becoming a bit of addictive. That was kind of their response. So it is possible. I just think it's great we're having this discussion. So that has got to be a good thing. We're going to move on. Did you have anything else to say about this topic?
No, I'm just getting the jitters that I haven't checked my Instagram for 15, 20 minutes.
I thought, check with your wife. She'll be on Pinterest, as a trad wife, won't she, with the disinformation project.
Recipes. Yeah.
All right, let's speaking of wives, let's talk about women, because this pay equity claim came out just before I get your response to this whole heated debate and what's really going on here, because I don't think everybody fully understands. I just want to show you a couple of clips. So the first one was one I published that everybody seemed to like, and it was just
Women are going to be paid less than men on an ongoing basis in order to pay for Nicola Willis's budget.
How do you and how does this government define a woman?
To be honest, Sean, that question's come slightly out of left field for me.
That never grows tired. I mean, you're talking about women's pay, but you can't define what a woman is. The other funny thing was some of the media coverage around this. I mean, I thought it was quite hysterical. Have a listen to this report from 3 News from Jenna Lynch and count how many adjectives, highly emotive adjectives there are.
The visceral anger on full show. Care and support workers are fuming.
This is about our dignity and our values.
Library workers gutted. Nurses thrown for a loop too. The Workplace Relations Minister made the shock announcement this morning. So those who are feeling hurt and angry,
It's like a slap in the face.
may just have those feelings intensify when Willis unveils her budget later this month.
Yes, hurt and angry. I mean, there was just so many I was going to say expletives, but it's not expletives, is it? It's very emotive adjectives. The other funny thing about the media coverage was that they went to the same activist who had, I found quite funny, had some funny things to say. So this was 3 News.
If I was allowed to, I'd go up and smack them in the face, but I'm not.
So that was activist on TV3, and then next minute, 1 News.
What's your message to the women in government, particularly the ministers?
They can kiss my fat ass.
Okay, so that was the same activist. So I just found it very funny, and pardon the language there, but I found it very funny that both 1 News and 3 News found the same activist with the same hilarious comments. Anyway, can you explain exactly what's going on here? Because my understanding, the law says you can't actually, or the law already says you can't pay two people in the office doing a similar job. If one's a woman, you can't pay them less than a man. So what's the issue?
So that's correct. Well, that's correct. Actually, one really quick observation about that activist. Notice the violence in the language. To be smacked in the face. They want to smack people in the face. And this is only a small element, but actually it's that normalizing of violence in our society. Look, pay equity, I'm probably not going to do it justice. Look, you can't pay men more than women these days, but the pay equity formula basically tries to take data from all around and just says, well, look, overall, men get paid more than women, which is probably demonstrably true. I know you've got a clip that you might share soon coming out of Australia, but more men are doctors, more people, more women rather, are nurses, by and large. And they go, right, well, there's a pay gap there. And you go, well, no, well, one group's a set of doctors and one group's a set of nurses. So there's a whole lot of, if you will, manipulation around the data to just keep crying out that there's this pay gap. But let's be really clear. If a woman was doing my job now, they'd be paid exactly the same. And yes, there are differences. Men tend to work longer. We don't get pregnant and have children. They don't factor that in, or rather the pay equity advocates do say, oh, well, therefore they're losing their income because, of course, to them there's no value in motherhood. So all of that stuff gets put to the wayside. But what the government's done here, and I'll try to make this really succinct, and I've written about it on my Substack, it's the difference between the why and the how. So the government's looking at this, and I've not been a great fan of pay equity laws. Let's be clear about this. It's complex. It's rather arbitrary. So who decides which group doesn't have pay equity? And then once they've decided that this group does have an issue, they have to compare it against another group to come up with what the pay should be. So like we will now take cleaners and astrophysicists. I mean, it's so arbitrary, Bob. It's nuts. And it is going to cost the taxpayer billions and billions of dollars. However, what the government did on Tuesday, so that's the why. Yeah. How the government's changed the law, I think, is terrible.
The process.
And that's been, the process was terrible. It's secretive. No one knew about it. All of a sudden, it's announced on Tuesday morning. It's rushed through the Parliament in urgency. It's all done and dusted. The change is done by midnight. No one knows the details. There's no debate in the public. There's no chance to go to select committee. There's no regulatory impact. There's nothing except, I think, wrong optics. And Prime Minister gleefully saying it's going to save billions of dollars. Well, yeah, but that's you basically, and Audrey Young sums it up, it's taking from Paula to pay Paul. They're taking potential monies for the lowest paid in our society to do what? So it's really bad optics of how they did this. And I think personally it's wrong.
So I saw there was examples where library assistants were being treated the same as engineers. Clerical staff at Health New Zealand were comparable to mechanical engineers. These are actual cases that were quoted in the cabinet paper. Yep. Social workers comparable to air traffic controllers. And look, that's
the arbitrary state of it. That's that arbitrary thing I said. It gets ridiculous. So why on earth are you comparing them? A library worker is not an engineer or whatever it was. It just becomes completely arbitrary. But I think we need to separate out the why the government's doing this, and I would tend to agree. It's absurd to make those comparators, but how they did it, I mean, this is going to be a rod for the government's back, in my view.
Yeah. Okay, let's just show this clip. So Sue Reid, who's on our board and one of our panellists for Straight Talk, sent this through to me. So this is in Australia. This is Malcolm Roberts, Senator Malcolm Roberts, and he was questioning the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. So do we have a Workplace Gender Equality Agency in New Zealand? No. The funny part is that 78% of the workforce at the Gender Equality Agency is women. But anyway, he was asked about this exact issue. Have a listen.
Thank you for appearing today. My question is fairly simple. It is illegal to pay men and women differently because of their sex in Australia, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. How long has that been the case?
I guess since the 60s. It's the late 60s.
Yeah, late 60s, thank you. Is the data you publish on comparing male pay versus female pay on a like-for-like job basis?
No, Senator, it very clearly is not, and it doesn't intend to be.
So you could, for example, publish airline employees, and majority of pilots are men at the moment. Women are increasing, and a majority of hostesses are female, so it would show a skew towards the men because pilots are paid more than hostesses.
That's absolutely right. That is the gender pay gap.
That's the point.
How is that the point?
That's what the gender pay gap calculates. It is not seeking to calculate a like-for-like comparison. The definition is, and let's say we're doing an average gender pay gap, it's the average salaries of all men and the average salaries of all women, and a comparison between the two. That is the simple, clear definition of the gender pay gap.
Isn't that a...
So, I mean, when you get in a plane, who do you want paid more, the hostess or the air pilot? And the air pilot may be female.
Well, that's the absurdity.
Yeah.
Again, that's the difference between, if anyone's been listening to me or, reading me in the last 12 hours, again, it's the difference between the how and the why. I don't like how they've done it, but the why is perfectly illustrated there by Senator Roberts. I mean, it's the perpetual arbitrary victimhood. You'll never be able to fix the gap. But that's what they want. They just want to keep complaining the whole time, and again, applying it to more and more professions, because ultimately this is quite a left-wing dynamic. It's one of the tools they use, Bob, to keep trying to drive up artificially wages. Yes, you're an air hostess. Wonderful. Right, well, you should be paid the same as the pilot. Like, what? So it's crazy. But, that's why this is actually quite an important discussion for people to understand. When they hear pay equity being mentioned, you've got to actually understand the dynamics and play behind it.
And when I was pushing back against some people and just saying, can you give us some actual examples of where a male and a female in a similar job is the woman is getting paid less? Generally, they can't give answers. It's kind of these generalizations. And
it's very abstract.
And then one of the pushbacks was, well, pay equity between secondary, primary, and early childhood educators. Now, there is a difference amongst that pay, but that's not based on gender. That's based on, qualifications, and there always has been a pay difference between secondary and primary, rightly or wrongly, but that's not actually part of this issue, is it?
No, it's not. If you really go to the heart of it, this is an extreme left-wing view that basically we should all be paid the same. They look at Soviet Russia, if I was to be a bit flippant, and say, those were the days everybody got $10,000, a bottle of vodka and a potato. It didn't matter if you're an accountant, a social worker, an army officer, an engineer, or a cleaner. And in some ways, that's what they're arguing for. There should be no difference in pay based on your job or your sex or anything. And it's like, well, there goes human flourishing for you. Of course there are differences, but we must come back to the fundamental point, which is men are not paid any more or less than women for the same jobs. Yeah. But yes, we're different. Men don't have babies. Men don't take maternity leave, by and large. That's just reality. And the second point, again, is how the government's done this, though. That's what I don't
the optics.
like. Yeah, not good.
It's going to be an anti-woman wedge. I saw that coming through in the media coverage. That was very clear. Speaking of women, though, they were happy to go after Erica Stanford. I'm interested to ask you, for a cabinet minister sending emails to her personal account so she can print them out, because she can't figure out how to do it on the government office or whatever. I sort of thought there was some sympathy here for Erica Stanford, simply because we've probably all done it, where we've forwarded ourselves something or printed something a bit loosely. But would you say, never mind, she's a cabinet minister, this is sensitive documentation?
Yeah, the long and short, this is not something that she should have done. Yep, it's been done before. In fact, her previous boss, Murray McCulley, was well known for sending all of his material to his Gmail account. There was Claire Curran from Labor. So look, it's happened before. This is not a once-off, but it shouldn't be done. And you can make the argument, I think rightly so, that technology is such now that you can actually print pretty much all things anywhere, anytime. If you can print the document from your Gmail you can print it from wherever else. So no, this was not the right decision. There are confidentiality issues. Ministers are not meant to use for their work any other system other than the, if you will, the parliamentary one. So it's bad practice. It's also a transparency issue. The Official Information Act applies to those official systems. And I'm not saying Erica's hiding anything. I don't think that's her intention from what I've read. But actually, by putting things onto your personal account, you bypass or sidestep the OIA. And so this is not something which should be tolerated at all by any minister.
Okay, let's just finish with a really, really positive one, and that is that New Zealand First MP Tanya Unkovic has introduced a very good bill around palliative care. There was actually some very nice coverage once again on Q&A. I just can't fault Q&A at the moment.
Hi there, my name is Tanya Unkovic. I'm a New Zealand First List MP, and the title of my member's bill is Improving Access to Palliative Care. What my bill will do is provide equitable, high-standard palliative care for all New Zealanders, people who want to die with dignity. What I would like is for the Ministry of Health and the Minister of Health to create a palliative care strategy, one that is documented, but not only documented, but also for them to be accountable.
Okay, we'll leave it there because we're just about out of time. But Simon, that's a great bill, one well worth supporting, and I love the fact that she said the word dignity, because that was the argument for euthanizing and killing off vulnerable older people who can't afford care, or relatives want the inheritance. So look, if we can fund world-class palliative care, we do away with the need for euthanasia.
We do, and if you flip it to the slightly negative too, we fully fund euthanasia, we don't fund palliative care. Look, I think Tanya's doing a great job. I think it's an amazing bill. I've actually just sat down with her today, Bob. I've done a podcast with her. So Q&A did a minute and a half. She and I have talked for over a good half an hour. So next week, listeners and viewers can see the latest episode of Family Matters, where she and I sit down and have a good old chat.
Okay, well, talk about name dropping. Far out. If I knew you were going to do that, I would have tried to interview someone famous, like, I don't know, Simon O'Connor or something. I am going to interview you actually about your trip to Israel. So that's going to be very interesting. In fact, that was interesting in Wellington, wasn't it? About that anti-Semitic spray painting all over the place.
Oh.
Has Tory Whanau, the mayor of Wellington, actually condemned that?
I haven't seen any comment. I see Helen Clark's husband, Peter Davis, has come out effectively and grotesquely basically blaming the Israelis that they deserve this. I mean, it's just what this has done is just shown the absolutely appalling anti-Semitism. And of course, nothing from the Chloe Swarlbucks or anything like that. And I see very quickly, Sean Plunkett raised today that Stuff ran is a major ad that some pro-Hamas group put into the papers, sort of, again, misrepresenting what's happening. So they won't let you and I put ads in about what is a woman, but they'll happily put in this stuff at the same day that people are graffitiing. It's just appalling, and it's happening right here in New Zealand. We need to wake up.
And that's why we're here, to call them to account. So thank you for watching Political Playback. We'll be back at the same time next week. Thank you, Simon. Until then, have a great night, everyone.